Hi, my name is Stephanie Merson, and this is my final project for EDFN 604. So before I get into my updated mind map, I think it's really important that educators understand why they are doing things that they're doing, number one. Number two, that they understand how the system works so that they can then become a part of it in a different way and lead to change that they would like to see within their own schools. So I think it's really important that teachers understand how all of these factors play into their day-to-day lives. So before we get into how the government affects education, I think it's important that we talk about the purpose of education. And I added a little, history of education. I'm not going to get into that right now, but David Larrabee's came up with three main purposes of education today. The first one being to prepare students to become future citizens. And you're going to hear this from educators, politicians, and parents. Another purpose is to prepare students to become future workers. And this you'll hear from business owners and politicians. And a third purpose is to prepare students to compete socially. And you'll hear this from parents and community members. This is important for teachers and educators to understand because different people have different reasons or different beliefs about what the purpose is for education. And I think the better we understand all of the purposes, the better we'll be able to reach all of those groups and be able to effectively make change within education. So now that we have the purpose, let's look at how the government works when it comes to education. I grouped education into either being culture conservative and believe in American exceptionalism, or have liberal culture values and believe in multiculturalism. And the reason why I did that is because it feels like everything that we read, whether it was the influences or at the government level, these two beliefs really played a lot in everything that was being decided for education, for educators and for students. So I linked them both I linked the cultural conservative to all levels, and I linked liberal cultural values to all levels as well. So at the federal level, we have the U.S. Department of Education. There's nothing in the Constitution about education, so at the federal level, they don't have a lot to say, but they do enact policies and regulations, and what they do is they tie money to it because they can't force states to adopt them. Since they attach money to it, states adopt them. We have the Department of Education, and then we have the Secretary of Education, who is Betsy DeVos. The state level, we have governors, state Department of Education, and the Board of Education. They set policies for their state, such as the standards, the graduation requirements, teacher qualifications requirements, and then statewide assessments. I use Pennsylvania as my example, so we have Governor Wolf, the Department of Ed, the PA Secretary of Education, who's Pedro Rivera, who's nominated by the governor and confirmed by the Senate. And then we have the PA Board of Education, who has 21 members total. Then at the local level, we have mayors, school board members, superintendents. They have to enact policies such as the types of curriculum that will be able to meet the standards. They have to make sure students meet graduation requirements. They have to make sure the teachers are qualified, and they have to get students ready for statewide assessment. I use my own school district as the example. So I have Central Bucks School District. We have taxpayers, school board members, superintendent, principal, assistant principal, teachers, and support staff. So the interaction between the school board and the superintendent and the taxpayers at the local level is different depending on the type of how the local level is organized. So we have dominated, pluralistic, inert, or factorial, and that can really influence the way those groups of people interact. So now that we understand the types or how education is affected by government, I want to talk about funding. So I really like this graph that you included because it really lays out how much money public schools should get in funding. So at the local level, about 45%, federally 8%, and then 47% state would come from the state. At the federal level, they attach policies to their funding to get them to go through. At the state level, they get their money from taxes and lotteries. They determine their funding for the following year based off of the state's economy. So if you had a good year, if your state had a good year, you'll get more money in the budget. There's lots of criteria to determine, but the main one is attendance. Then we have the local level. They get their money from local taxes and fundraisers. I found this graph of my own school district in the 2018-2019 school year that I thought was really interesting. They broke it down, how much money they got from each level. So you'll see the state level, 21% of our money came from the state, 1% came from the federal level, and 78% came from the local level. And then they broke down that local level, excuse me, and you'll see 81.7% came from the RE tax at the local level. So when it comes to Pennsylvania, It's considered an inequitable state. We are ranked 9th overall in spending. We spend about $5,000 per student per year. The most money goes to teacher salaries and benefits. Because we're so dependent on local money in Pennsylvania, because there's so many school districts, that means a student in one school district may have a very different educational experience than a kid who lives 5-10 minutes away and goes to a different school district. We use the fair funding formula, which you pointed out is not always fair, and attendance to determine money. And I included this graph too because I thought it was really interesting. So 57% of Pennsylvania school funding comes from the local level, 34% comes from the state, 3% comes from the federal level, and 6% comes from other. And that other funding is mostly coming from civil society groups. So I'm going to go down and we're going to talk about different influences outside of government that affect education. So when it comes to influences, we have civil society, who include teachers' unions that were originally created to improve teachers' pay and working conditions, the NEA and the PSEA. We have professional organizations that were created to serve their specific purpose. So we have the American Educational Research Association. We have think tanks that support people who are doing research and writing policy. They hope to influence public policy. My example is Progressive Policy Institute. We have foundations who give financial support to actual projects, and they hope to influence public thinking as well. And my example is the Heritage Foundation. Then we have special interest groups, which can be businesses, animal rights groups, religious groups, environmental groups, liberal conservative groups, gun control groups. But two of the biggest examples that influence education are the Christian Coalition of America and People for the American Way. Then we have global influences that affect education. So there are many organizations that measure academic success and influence education globally. We have the OECD and the IEA, who produce tests like the TIMSS, the PEARLS, and the PISA that compare countries' educational systems. When those results come in with comparisons, countries jump to make changes because everybody wants to be number one. And then we have the United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization. They have a social justice curriculum that they are pushing. And then we have the World Bank, who hands out educational loans to developing countries. And so there are many more global influences. These are just some of the major players. So I also included textbook publishing as an influence. I know that it was technically connected to our for-profit educational services, but I think it is a really big influence, so I included it here. I have Texas and California because these are two of the major states that affect a lot and influence other states. So in Texas, we have the Texas Board of Education, and they have a state review panel, and those members get to choose the textbooks for the entire state. It's very different than Pennsylvania, where each district gets to decide. But once Texas picks, because they are so huge, other states follow whatever textbooks they pick. But we see there's a lot of issues there. There's a lot of religious debates and political debates about what should and what should not be included. In California, they went a different way. They decided to use open source textbooks because it could save a lot of money, but there's a lot of issues with teachers adding and taking away information. And they have the California Open Source Textbook Project that lobbies for laws that will support open source publishing and government funding. So since I just talked about textbook publishing, I'm going to go all the way down to the other for-profit educational services. So we have first supplementary educational services, so educational services outside of school that students can access. The Educational Industry Association, SES Coalition, really lobbies politicians for money and protection of their materials, and they do this by franchising things like Sylvan and Kumon, those tutoring businesses that we see that a lot of teachers work at on the side. And then we have for-profit charter schools and management companies. There's the U.S. Charter School Organization that really lobbies politicians on charter schools' behalf, and they rely on federal and state money and laws that support choice when it comes to schools. And there are three examples: the Imagine Schools, Edison Learning, and then I added in American Paradigm Schools, which was the charter school that I worked at my first 3 years of teaching. All right, so now that we have all of that, I want to look at how policy works its way through all of that. It's a lot, right? So I found these two pictures from the policy website that was shared in one of our modules. And so I want to look at the linear model first. So we have this prediction and prescription, so the problem that's going on, and then these policymakers that jumps in. And there are so many policymakers when it comes to education that is what I think is a little scary about it. But policymakers can be politicians, they can be interest groups, they can be voters, they can be bureaucrats, they can be people at the state level, at the federal level, at the local level, but they can also be all of these civil society groups. So teachers unions, professional organizations, think tanks, foundations, special interest groups, under foundations. I'm thinking of all the philanthropists. They're really pushing for a policy to be created when it comes to education. So then those policymakers figure out the policy choice, they implement it, and then they come up with a policy outcome. This is a more cyclical view of the policy, of educational policymaking, and I enjoy this one a little bit better, and it makes more sense in my head. So you have the problem that you identify, and then you think of the policy stakeholders, how you're going to develop the policy, how much money you're going to need, who you're going to lobby, what kind of fundraising you're going to do. Then the policies being actually put onto paper in laws and regulations, and then how to implement the policies, or you're then implementing the policies. And then this goes on and on and on. So once you implement the policy, you see there might be another problem, and then you go around and do it again. So this is everything that I learned, and what bigger picture I learned is that it is a lot, and a lot of stuff's interconnected that you don't necessarily know, like those influences that are connected and make a lot of change. Here is my, I'm trying to blow it up, here's my references. And then just one more thing that I wanted to mention is that I really appreciate understanding all of this a little bit better, particularly right now, with all of the conversations that are going on when it comes to reopening schools. This is why I think it's important for educators to understand this, because there are people who are having conversations about education right now that don't necessarily understand how education works at the federal level, what they can and cannot do, and how the states have a lot more say than people really think. And so I think it's really important for us to understand that, so when these conversations come up, we know how to best support our politicians at the state level, or who to reach out to when we need support when it comes to things like reopening schools amidst a pandemic. So for this exact reason, I think it's important for educators to understand who is influencing these decisions that are being made, that we are a part of every single day. All right, thank you so much. Bye.